when sinners plunge beneath that flood, lose all their guilty stains.
And thou shalt make the oracle of judgment, the work of the embroiderer, in keeping with the ephod. Thou shalt make it of gold, and blue, and purple, and spun scarlet, and fine linen spun. Thou shalt make it square. It shall be double of a span the length of it, and a span the breadth. And thou shalt interweave with it a texture of 4 rows of stone. There shall be a row of stones, a sardius, a topaz, an emerald, the first row, and the second row, a carbuncle, a sapphire, and a jasper, and the third row, a ligure, an agate, an amethyst, and the fourth row, a chrysolite, and a beryl, and an onyx stone, set round with gold, bound together with gold. Let them be according to their row. And let the stones of the names of the children of Israel be 12 according to their names, engravings as of seals. Let them be for the 12 tribes, each according to the name. Exodus 28:15-13, Brenton Septuagint. In the Old Covenant, the breastplate described above is the oracle of judgment that only the high priest wore, because he represented all the tribes of Israel. Each tribe was assigned these 12 specific gemstones, in that specific sequence, denoting the 12 tribes according to their names and order of birth. Ezekiel was a 6th century BC Israelite priest and prophet, known for his visions and prophecies during the Babylonian exile. Ezekiel was given a vision by the Lord of what the corrupt leadership of Israel were really up to. So I went in and looked, and beheld vain abominations, and all the idols of the house of Israel, portrayed upon them round about, and 70 men of the elders of the house of Israel, and Jechonias the son of Shaphan, stood in their presence in the midst of them, and each one held his censer in his hand, and the smoke of the incense went up. Ezekiel 8:10-11, Brenton Septuagint. And then further on in the book of Ezekiel, we see what God says about Satan, who is personalized here as the prince of Tyre. Thou hast bound upon thee every precious stone, the sardius and topaz and emerald, and carbuncle and sapphire and jasper, and silver and gold, and ligure and agate, and amethyst, and chrysolite, and beryl, and onyx. And thou hast filled thy treasures and thy stones in thee with gold. Ezekiel 28:13, Brenton Septuagint. The Lord is showing Ezekiel, and showing us, that Satan has clothed himself with the exact same gemstones, in the exact same sequence as the high priest wore. He is wearing the oracle. However, this vital and important fact is only evident when we read the ancient Greek Old Testament Septuagint, which is the same Old Testament scriptures that Jesus and the apostles used and quoted. Because unfortunately, the order and type of breastplate gemstones were revised and corrupted by the rabbis when they rewrote their modern Hebrew translation of the Old Testament into what we falsely call today the original Hebrew, the Masoretic text. Let's compare side by side the names and order of the gemstones between the ancient Greek Old Testament Septuagint and the corrupted Hebrew Masoretic text Old Testament. We see in Exodus 28:15-21 which 12 gemstones the Lord instructs to be used on the breastplate. But here we notice that in the Hebrew Masoretic text, the rabbis have removed the gemstone called chrysolite and inserted diamond in its place. The rabbis also reversed the order of the emerald, carbuncle, and jasper. And then, when we examine Ezekiel 28:13, we see that Satan has literally clothed himself with the exact same gemstones, in the exact same sequence, as the high priest of Israel, as described in Exodus. Satan himself is wearing the oracle, but the rabbis have revised their Hebrew Old Testament to hide this fact. The Masoretic text has omitted 3 gemstones from verse 13 in Ezekiel 28, only mentioning 9 of the 12 gemstones and completely out of order as well. Star of Saturn is one of the most high occultic symbols used extensively in sigil magic for conjuring and controlling demons. The Star of Saturn is also used in Kabbalah to represent their androgyne god, symbolizing the union between masculine and feminine gods, the male deity Yahweh and the feminine deity Shekinah. The Star of Saturn is so occultic that it is used in the most highest orders of witchcraft, like Aleister Crowley's Order of Thelema. On thelemapedia.org, it showcases the works of Aleister Crowley, for example, his Greater Ritual of the Hexagram. Crowley explains the procedure. The hexagram of Earth alone is used. Trace the astrological sigil of the planet in the center of your hexagram. Use a conjuration with the name of the god corresponding to the planet or sign you're dealing with. And then if we scroll down, we see the different names of their gods, which are attached to specific planets. And please note that every one of these names are the Hebrew names invented within the Tetragrammaton of Yod-He-Vav-He. To conjure the demon attached to the sun, the name is Yahweh Yod-He-Vav-He Eloah Vedath. Mercury's name is Elohim Zabaoth. Venus's name is Yod-He-Vav-He Zabaoth. To conjure the demon attached to the moon, the name is Shaddai El-Chai. Mars's name is Elohim Gibor. Jupiter's is El. And finally, we have the god of Saturn, whose name is Yod-He-Vav-He Elohim. These are all the names that the Jews have tricked Christians into believing are names for God the Father. But in actuality, these are the names of the wandering stars, or more specifically, fallen angels, all derived from the Hebrew Kabbalah Jewish name game. We must remember that these Kabbalah names of the Tetragrammaton and the Tetragrammaton itself were never used in the oldest translation of the Hebrew scriptures, the Septuagint. These names are an invention of the modern Hebrew occultic language of the Masoretic text, the medieval Bible of the Jewish Kabbalists. I wanted to show you that clip from my previous documentary, Jesus Never Called God Yod-He-Vav-He, to expose how the names derived from the false Hebrew language are loved, worshipped, and adored in the occult and witchcraft, specifically for invoking demonic spirits. Yes, I did call the Hebrew language false, and we'll be diving into why I said that in the following chapters. So what we were looking at there in the clip we just watched was a magic circle printed on a large sheet. This magic circle is called the Solomonic Circle with a triangle of conjuration in the east. Normally this magic circle is written only in Hebrew, so I personally couldn't translate the names written on it. After searching far and wide, I was very thankful to find this footage of the actual magic circle where the Hebrew was translated into English, where we can see with our own eyes that the names of the false Kabbalah gods of the Masoretic text are used to invoke and conjure spirits and entities. This specific method of conjuring is called the Ars Goetia of the Lesser Key of Solomon, which utilizes angelic name magic and sigil magic to invoke the 72 demons of the Jewish Shem HaMephorash, which means the explicit name of the Tetragrammaton. Goetia is a word that references sorcery or ceremonial magic focused on the evocation of spirits, often associated with black magic or demonic practices. The false Hebrew Kabbalah name game is a vital part of rabbinical Judaism's magic. This is why there has been a huge push to change the mighty name of Jesus to Yeshua, who is not the Jesus Christ of the New Testament. Here in a book I've discovered called Aleister Crowley's Illustrated Goetia,
we read something very fascinating about the name Yeshua on page 50 and 51. The hexagram of Solomon. The Golden Dawn defined the hexagram as a powerful symbol representing the operation of the 7 planets under the presidency of the Sephiroth, which is the Kabbalah's tree of knowledge of good and evil. This very recognizable symbol of Judaism, sometimes called the Shield of David, is a most appropriate emblem of the divine macrocosm, the big world of God, represented in ancient times by the sun surrounded by the 6 then-known planets. The Goetic magician wears the hexagram on the skirt of his or her robe to act as a shield or badge of authority. By displaying the hexagram to the spirit, the magician proves he or she is part of and representative of the macrocosm order, with full power to exercise that authority. Upon seeing the hexagram, the spirits, by tradition, are compelled to take on human form. Modern magicians should feel free to make the hexagram as ornate or as simple as they see fit, but by no means should omit this very important magical device. The Pentagram of Solomon. The Golden Dawn defined the pentagram as a powerful symbol representing the operation of the eternal spirit and the 4 elements under the presidency of the letters of the name Yeshua. In contrast to the hexagram, the pentagram is a symbol of the microcosm, the little world of man, represented by the 4 elements of fire, water, air, and earth, governed by the 5th element of spirit. As hexagram affirms that the magician is in harmony with the macrocosmic order, the pentagram affirms that he is a master of the microcosmic order. By wearing these 2 symbols, the magician is reminded that he or she is positioned between heaven and hell, executor of the gods and master of the demons. In her book, Kabbalah Secrets Christians Need to Know, author Deanne Loper proves that Yeshua is not the same Messiah as the true Jesus Christ of the New Testament. Deanne Loper's book is a commentary on the book, The Return of the Kosher Pig, written by Kabbalist Messianic Rabbi Itzhak Shapira.
You know what Israel need today? They need Yeshua. They need Yeshua. But if you bring Jesus, you bring the wrong guy. Don't bring us Jesus. But if you bring Jesus, you bring the wrong guy.
In her book, Deanne writes, according to Orthodox or Hasidic Judaism, there are 4 levels or layers of interpreting the Bible. Peshat is the first layer and refers to the plain meaning of the text. Remez relates to what is implied below the surface. Drash or midrash means to dig deeper while focusing on the writing of the sages. Sod is the 4th level. The word sod means secret and refers to the hidden esoteric meaning. The practice of sod requires immersion into the occult practices of Kabbalah. The Torah of sod is Kabbalah. Simply stated, Kabbalah is sorcery. It is consulting with demons to obtain secret knowledge, a practice forbidden by God in Deuteronomy 18. It is man's vain attempt to return to the paradise of the Garden of Eden through the Kabbalistic tree of knowledge of good and evil. The word sod literally means a secret. One example of the Torah of sod is gematria. The Kabbalah and the Zohar are sod terms that are familiar to those within Orthodox circles. According to Orthodox Judaism, sod represents the highest pinnacle of Jewish study and requires great care. Because the knowledge of sod comes from the serpent and is satanic at its root, it is no surprise that the rabbis give a stern warning regarding the spiritual dangers involved. The occult practice utilizes gematria, which is numerology, changing and rearranging the order of the letters and words of Scripture to find a hidden meaning within the text. Sod also involves a transformation of one's consciousness through mystical meditation, breathing exercises, and repetition of the divine name. The name that is primarily used to ascend the Kabbalah Sephiro tree of knowledge is Metatron. Metatron is a fallen angel, and this is who Shapira, through rabbinic writings, identifies as Yeshua. Shapira draws on an array of rabbinic sources to show that Yeshua is Metatron, the fallen angel who gives knowledge to mankind, and a prominent figure in the writings of Kabbalah and the Babylonian Talmud. Having established a thoroughly Kabbalistic framework for the case of the kosher pig, Shapira attempts to validate the authority of the Babylonian oral Torah. Using a 19th century Hebrew translation of the New Testament, Shapira misleads his readers by telling them that the word traditions in 2 Thessalonians 2:15 is a word Kabbalat, which is a plural of Kabbalah. This is a prime example of twisting the scriptures in order to deceive. And reading further in her book, we see that Deanne thoroughly shows how Kabbalah has given many names to their false Messiah, Yeshua. It is apparent from Shapira's regard of Metatron that he puts much confidence in Jewish mystical writings, which he refers to as deeper waters. These esoteric books deny the deity of Jesus Christ, yet give preeminence to a fallen angel and name him as equal to God the Creator. Again and again we see that Shapira has no problem relying on gematria and mysticism to support his thesis that Metatron is Yeshua, Enoch, and even El Shaddai. On pages 242 and 244, Shapira provides us with the following formulas to illustrate Metatron's divine nature and equality with God. He shows that Sar Hapanim equals Metatron equals angel of his presence equals Yeshua equals Enoch equals Shaddai. Quoting one rabbinic source after another, Shapira notes, the word Metatron in gematria equates to the value of the word Shaddai. We can conclude that Metatron is El Shaddai, the manifestation of God who is visible on earth and visible to men. At last, the true identity of Metatron is revealed, as Shapira quotes yet more rabbinic sources. As we know, Metatron is the prince of the world, and he, Metatron, is a lad who serves from above as the sages explained. He is the keeper of the gate. Enoch is Metatron. Metatron is called the guardian of Israel. Tractate 44 in the Babylonian Talmud speaks about the prince of the world, who is called the great Metatron. He, Metatron, has 7 names. But in John 14:30, just before his crucifixion, Jesus identified Satan as the prince of this world. Paul the Apostle called Satan the god of this world, who blinds the minds of those who are lost and to whom the gospel is hidden. In Ephesians chapter 2, verse 2, he is called the prince of the power of the air. So now we see the truth. That Kabbalist Messianic rabbi Itzhak Shapira proves that Yeshua is actually the name of Satan according to Jesus Christ and his apostles in the New Testament. Yeshua, also known as Metatron in the Kabbalah, is an impostor sitting on a throne in the spirit realm, posing as the Messiah, who is illuminating Christ-rejecting rabbis and mystics with counterfeit visions of himself as God.
The wisdom of Kabbalah cannot be received without drinking from the cup of Babylon, as Kabbalah imposes a mystical, esoteric interpretation into the scriptures. It is chilling to note that the rabbis repeatedly relate stories from Kabbalistic literature, the same sources Shapira references in his book, which describe degrees of initiation in which the adept must journey past the 7 heavens and through the doorways of the 7 palaces, by means of secret names and seals, either upon his person or in his mind. The church today is at a crossroads, as one of the best-selling Bibles among Christians is the Israel Bible, a Bible without Jesus. Growing within the church is a wide body of rabbis who impress audiences with their extensive knowledge of ancient mysteries that are hidden in Scripture. What is not easily discerned is that these mysteries are rooted in the traditions of Babylonian and Kabbalistic doctrines, which arose out of Egyptian and Chaldean occultism.
It stands to reason, therefore, that these same teachers, illuminated in esoteric Judaism, must also understand the dark sentences of the craft of Kabbalah. Step by step, we are witnessing a gradual metamorphosis, a transformation of the gospel in which the centrality of the position of Jesus Christ in Scripture is slowly being replaced by another gospel, another spirit, another Jesus, another kingdom. And the voice of the bridegroom still calls, "Come out of her, my people." The next clip is from the Song of the Bride YouTube channel by incredible researcher and warrior for Christ, Dolly Weber. The clip is taken from her Holy Spirit-led video, "Did Jesus Authorize You to Call Him Yeshua?"
So-called Rabbi Itzhak Shapira presents incredible and blasphemous details about Metatron, Yeshua, and the endgame they are bringing. Any astute Bible believer readily recognizes those details as matching many elements of the Antichrist and his agenda. Yitzhak Shapira states the following about Yeshua. Christianity is Edom, and when Yeshua comes back, he is going to destroy Christianity as an entity. Does that sound like Jesus to you? As if we need any more evidence to reevaluate renaming Jesus. I have one more piece of evidence that you're not going to believe. When we say Yeshua, we are verbalizing an acronym for an old Yiddish curse, Yamak Shemo. May his name and his memory be obliterated. Today, the names Yeshu and Yeshua are used interchangeably as referring to Jesus. An unknown to most Christians is the fact that Yeshu, or Yeshua, also abbreviated YS, is a well-known acronym for a Yiddish curse, widely known and gladly spoken against Jesus by those who hate him. It is used 26 times against Jesus in the Talmud. On an interview with Benny Hinn, so-called Rabbi Shapira and so-called Rabbi Jonathan Bernis, president of the Jewish Voice, discussed the curse when the topic came up rather unexpectedly.
And we have a 2,000-year history of animosity and persecution, sadly, in the name of Christ and Christianity. But as a result of that and the sage's decision to reject Jesus as the Messiah, he became a curse word in Judaism. He became the unkosher thing that the Christians embrace, but representing to the Jewish community pain and suffering and persecution. Even the name of Yeshua, Yeshu, is a cursed one.
Yeah.
Well, wait, so the word Yeshu?
Yeshu is Imach Shmo V'Zichro. May his name be blotted for eternity. Blotted out for eternity.
Is that what it means?
Literally, that's what it's named, of course.
Now, most Jews don't connect Yeshu and understand that, right?
I tell you, for me as an Israeli, every Jew know that Yeshu is Imach Shmo V'Zichro. It is his name now. Please understand. This is the name our people know him as by.
What blasphemous devils would deceive Christians not only to exchange the true name of Jesus with a counterfeit, but to replace his name with an actual curse word? It's time for all true followers of Jesus to wake up and call their master Jesus by his rightful name, Jesus, the name that signifies salvation, not the name that signifies a curse.
The Tetragrammaton is a four-letter code name that the Babylonian Talmud describes as a true name of the God of Rabbinical Judaism. However, the New Testament tells us in 1 John 2:23, "No one who denies the Son has the Father. Whoever acknowledges the Son has the Father." The Bible tells us that Christians and rabbis do not serve the same God, as they completely reject Jesus Christ as God the Son. If the unbelieving rabbis call their God Yod-He-Vav-He, but Jesus, who is God the Son, and his disciples never called God the Father Yod-He-Vav-He even once, who should Christians be imitating? Should Christians be following the example shown in the New Testament? Or should they be following what the rabbis write in their Babylonian Talmud?
Protestant reformer Martin Luther wrote a book in 1543 called Von Shem HaMephorash, It is a highly critical commentary on rabbinical Judaism and their tetragrammaton, the ineffable Kabbalah name of the Shem HaMephorash. Within it, Martin Luther writes, "Here in Wittenberg, in our parish church, there is a sow carved into the stone under which lie young pigs and Jews who are sucking. Behind the sow stands a rabbi who is lifting up the right leg of the sow, bows down and looks with great effort into the Talmud under the sow, as if he wanted to read and see something most difficult and exceptional. No doubt they gain their Shem HaMephorash from that place." Further, of such mockery they prove truly first their super-celestial mastery, since they say that Jesus of Nazareth has done miraculous signs with his Shem HaMephorash, which means the revealed name. They ascribe such divine works and miracles to the Shem HaMephorash, that is, to the single, dead, wretched letters in the book thus written with ink, or float on the tongue, or are carried in the heart, also by the godless. It is but Satan and altogether all godless names and works in sacred letters. But the rabid Jews give the Shem HaMephorash divine power, as bare single letters without any promise or commandments of God. But digging deeper, we find something even more peculiar. Yah is the God of Kabbalah, and not the God of the Bible. In order to understand this, we need to go straight to the primary source text of the Jewish Kabbalah to prove it. Let's visit the website Sefaria.org, where we read, "Sefaria is home to 3,000 years of Jewish texts. We are a non-profit organization offering free access to texts, translation, and commentaries so that everyone can participate in the ongoing process of studying, interpreting, and creating Torah. Here on Sefaria.org, we can read translations of the full library of Jewish texts, including several mystical books of the Luciferian Kabbalah, as well as a satanic Babylonian Talmud. In my past videos, I've dived deep into how the Jewish Kabbalah is the antithesis to biblical Christianity. It is the spiritual technology of Lucifer's false light system of government, derived from the serpent and used in the sorcery of ancient Babylon and Egypt, and today serves as a religious foundation of the world's most powerful occult secret societies, such as Freemasonry and Rosicrucianism. Let's go to the book called the Sefer Yetzirah, which, according to Sefaria.org, is the earliest existing Jewish mystical work in the Kabbalah describing how God used the Hebrew alphabet and numbers to create the world. The Kabbalah's Sefer Yetzirah was most likely written in the Talmudic times between 70 AD and 200 AD. Rabbi Moses ben Jacob Kadovero suggests that Rabbi Akiva wrote the Sefer Yetzirah. Rabbi Akiva was the fierce hater of Jesus Christ, who basically founded the post-70 AD version of rabbinical Judaism that we see today. Rabbi Akiva also mentored Aquila of Sinope, also known as Onkelos the Necromancer in the Babylonian Talmud, who we will be deeply examining in the future chapters, because Onkelos the Necromancer's Aramaic Targum served as a foundation of the Aaron ben Moses ben Asher tradition of the Masoretic text, which is the false modern Hebrew Old Testament that we know today. Here on Sefaria.org, in the book of Kabbalah, called the Sefer Yetzirah, we read in chapter 1, verse 1, Yah, Adonai of hosts, God of Israel, living God and King of the world, El Shaddai, merciful and gracious, high and exalted, dwelling ever above, holy is his name. He carved and created his world in 32 wondrous ways of wisdom, with 3 linguistic tools, the counting, with writing, and with speech. Okay, so what we really need to understand here is that these mystical names were never used in the oldest translation of the Old Testament that still exists today, the Greek Old Testament Septuagint. This is the Old Testament that Jesus and the apostles were reading and quoting, as we saw and read with our own eyes earlier in the first episode of this documentary here.
These Kabbalistic names were not inserted into the Christian Old Testament until the unbelieving, Christ-hating rabbis wrote their Kabbalistic version of the Old Testament nearly 1,000 years after Jesus' life and ministry. This version of the Old Testament is called the Masoretic text, and it is written in the Kabbalistic modern Hebrew block script that wasn't engineered until centuries after Christ's life, crucifixion, and resurrection. Watch my previous documentary here where I dive deeper into this anomaly. The Masoretic text is falsely called the original Hebrew Bible by most people today, when in fact it is much younger and newer than the ancient Greek Old Testament Septuagint that was translated directly from the Phoenician Paleo-Hebrew scriptures by 70 Israelite scribes centuries before Jesus was even born, around the year 285 BC. And these 70 Hebrew scribes, who were faithfully awaiting their Messiah, the Christ, never gave God a proper name, but merely translated this four-letter Phoenician Paleo-Hebrew script word into the Greek word kurios, which translates to Lord in English, proving that they did not originally use the Kabbalistic concept of the Tetragrammaton, the Talmudic four-letter magic code name for the God of Kabbalah, all of which I've covered in previous videos. And the final blow to these false names of the Kabbalah gods of the rabbis is the fact that Jesus and the apostles never once used them. Not only that, but Jesus and the apostles never even mentioned the existence of a four-letter proper name of God. They only called God the Father, Father, Abba, Lord, and God. I have proved that they were not reading or quoting scriptures that contain these false Kabbalah names, and that is why Jesus and the apostles never used them once in the New Testament, where we are actually warned against following the rabbis and their Jewish fables in the book of Titus 1:13 and 14, where we read, "This witness is true. Wherefore convince them sharply, that they may be sound in the faith, and not taking heed to Jewish fables and commandments of men that turn away from the truth." And just as I have proven to you here now, these false names do not come from the ancient true Old Testament, but are directly taken from the Kabbalah, literally, in the very first sentence of the oldest Kabbalistic text, the Sefer Yetzirah, which we have seen here with our own eyes. The origins of the false god named Yahweh are in fact very ancient, but Yahweh began not as the one true God of the Israelites, but as a lesser god among a pantheon of many ancient pagan Canaanite deities, such as Baal, El, and Asherah. Yahweh was worshipped by the ancient Israelites when they were in apostasy against the Lord. This is proven by the ancient Counterfeit inscriptions, which were discovered in 1975 during the Israeli excavations of the Sinai Peninsula. These are a group of inscriptions written on ancient large storage jars that also feature paintings written on pottery, stone, and plaster, likely from the Jerusalem area, dated to the 9th century BC. One of these storage jars shows 5 figures including a bull, a calf, a seated musician, and written above this is the phrase Yahweh of Samaria and his Asherah. Asherah is the female goddess demon who was worshipped by the Israelites in the Bible when they were in apostasy. While the title Queen of Heaven was also applied to other goddesses like Ishtar, Astarte, and Isis, biblical scholars frequently equate the specific Queen of Heaven mentioned in the Bible with Asherah due to the context of household fertility worship and the destruction of her wooden poles called Asherim by the righteous King Josiah as he rebuked the pagan idolatry. We read about the demonic Queen of Heaven in Jeremiah chapter 51 verse 18 in the Brenton Septuagint. But since we left off to burn incense to the Queen of Heaven, we have all been brought low and have been consumed by sword and famine.
The false gods, Yahweh and Asherah, are still worshipped today in rabbinical Judaism, but Asherah is now called Shekinah and still known as the Queen of Heaven, the feminine goddess of Kabbalah. And Yahweh, Yod-He-Vav-He, isn't supposed to be pronounced except for the highest of skilled sorcerers conjuring the Shem HaMfarash, which means the explicit name of the Tetragrammaton, Yod-He-Vav-He, that contains within it 72 hidden demons. And when the rabbis build their third satanic temple, the Kabbalah says that Yahweh will finally reunite once again with the feminine divine, Shekinah, Asherah, and the temple will be their bedchamber. This is why it was so important for the unbelieving Kabbalistic rabbis to insert the Tetragrammaton into their medieval Hebrew Bible, the Masoretic text, written in 1008 AD, so they could still publicly worship their pagan false gods, but trick Christians into doing it too. If the name Yeshua means Yod-He-Vav-He saves, but Yod-He-Vav-He is the Canaanite pagan god of metallurgy and consort of Asherah, then that is even more reason not to use the name Yeshua. In the Kabbalah Hebrew name game, the Christ-rejecting rabbis have tricked us into accepting dozens of wild pagan names to call upon instead of calling upon the only name that the Bible actually gives us. The mighty name of Jesus, the only name by which we are saved.
Jesus is really Yeshua.
Yeshua is Memtet. Yeshua is Memtet.
Shem HaMfarash. Shem HaMfarash.
The name is Jobulon, Jehovah, Baal, and Osiris.
Yah, Bel, On. Yah, Bel, On.
Hail Satan.
Hail Satan.
Shem HaMfarash.
Shem HaMfarash.
But if you bring Jesus, you bring the wrong guy.
But Jesus has literally, the word literally has no meaning. Yeshua is a manifestation of the Shekinah, who is the feminine aspect of God.
Jesus is really Yeshua.
Shem Ham Farash. Shem Ham Farash. Shem Ham Farash. Shem Ham Farash. Shem Ham Farash.
But thanks be unto God, which hath given us victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. Who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall tribulation or anguish, or persecution, or famine, or nakedness, or peril, or sword? As it is written, For thy sake are we killed all day long. We are counted as sheep for the slaughter. Nevertheless, in all these things we are more than conquerors through him that loved us. Then I heard a loud voice in heaven, saying, Now is salvation and strength, and the kingdom of our God, and the power of his Christ. For the accuser of our brethren is cast down, which accused them before our God day and night. But they overcame him by the blood of that Lamb and by the word of their testimony, and they loved not their lives unto the death. I am able to do all things through the help of Christ, which strengtheneth me. Finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord, and in the power of his might. Put on the whole armor of God, that ye may be able to stand against the assaults of the devil. In order to identify the Kabbalah sigil magic being used in the 16 carpet pages of the Masoretic text Leningrad Codex, we need to examine the earliest Jewish Kabbalistic grimoires and magical rabbinical practices that emerged during and after the Talmudic age that followed the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 AD in their newly formed religion of Rabbinical Judaism. I'm going to read some excerpts from the book Jewish Magic and Superstition, A Study in Folk Religion by Joshua Trachtenberg. Sheltered from Christian eyes by secrecy and the impenetrable wall of a strange tongue and an even stranger mystical vocabulary and method peculiar to itself, there flourished in Jewish circles a magic lore as extensive and potent as any known to the non-Jewish world, yet markedly different in character and technique. Thus we find encosked in the Hebrew lore beliefs and practices emanating from the entire Mediterranean world, representatives of ancient Babylon and Egypt, nestled against Greco-Roman specimens, newer Egyptian developments entering by way of the Hellenistic recension, hobnobbing with the latest Chaldaic doctrine, as exemplified in the Babylonian Gemara. Not until the Gaonic age, which succeeded the Talmudic, do we find the beginnings of a definitely Jewish magic. It was in this period that Jewish mysticism, influenced to a considerable degree by Gnostic thought, took shape, though its origin undoubtedly goes back to the earlier periods. Gaonic mysticism opened the portals to a higher wisdom, and a more potent magic, combined with the older electric lore. This evolving theurgy bloomed luxuriantly in the Germanic lands, whither its most secret mysteries were transported and incautiously revealed to the gaze of initiate and tyro alike. This magic may properly be denominated Jewish, for all its more or less assimilated foreign elements, and its general similarity to the Gnostic Jewish system, imperfectly known to non-Jews as the Ars Notoria. It remained distinctive in its basic emphasis. The primary principle of medieval Jewish magic was an implicit reliance by calling upon their names, the holy names of God and his angels. Knowledge of the names which Jewish magic worked was inaccessible to women, for it required not only a thorough training in Hebrew and Aramaic, which most of them lacked,
but also a deep immersion in mystical lore from which they were barred. One may define the Jewish magician as a scholar by vocation, a practitioner of the mystical magical arts by avocation. Every mystic, properly trained, could practice magic as a sideline. Indeed, the dangers of invoking the spirits without an adequate education in mysticism were frequently stressed, and the possessor of esoteric traditions and writings was sternly counseled to keep them hidden from the common glance, lest they be misused, and to pass them on only to a select circle. Two broad types of Kabbalah have been distinguished in Jewish tradition, the theoretical Kabbalah and the practical Kabbalah. While Kabbalists themselves limit the term to name invocation, in popular usage it was generic for the entire corpus of Jewish magic. Okay, so what the author is talking about here is that the Jewish Kabbalah is traditionally divided into distinct categories such as theoretical and practical Kabbalah. Theoretical Kabbalah is the mystical interpretation of the Torah, and by mystical I mean inverted and Gnostic. Theoretical Kabbalah focuses on the occult study of the spirit realm and the study of the Sephirot tree of knowledge of good and evil, as well as the mechanisms of creation. It's a conceptual framework to understand the nature of the false god of Kabbalah, who is actually in alignment to be Lucifer. And no marvel, for Satan himself is changed into the fashion of an angel of light. Therefore it is no great thing, though his ministers fashion themselves as though they were the ministers of righteousness, whose end shall be according to their deeds. And then we have practical Kabbalah, which is concerned with applying mystical knowledge to produce tangible effects in the physical world. So in other words, it's sorcery and witchcraft. It involves techniques such as the use of divine names and incantations, the creation of amulets, talismans, and even the creation of artificial life forms like the golem. Please keep in mind that the primary foundation of Jewish Kabbalah magic is a conjuring of spirits through the incantation of the pantheon of divine names derived from the Kabbalah's Tetragrammaton, also known as the Shem HaMfarash, which means the explicit name in modern Hebrew, and is a concept invented in the Tannaitic or Talmudic time period that flourished after the life and ministry of Jesus Christ and after the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 AD. There shall not be found in thee one who purges his son or his daughter with fire, one who uses divination, who deals with omens and augury, fortune-telling, sorcerer employing incantation, one who has in him a divining spirit, and observer of signs, questioning the dead. For every one that does these things is an abomination to the Lord thy God. For because of these abominations the Lord will destroy them from before thy face. Thou shalt be perfect before the Lord thy God. For all these nations whose land thou shalt inherit, they will listen to omens and divinations, but the Lord thy God has not permitted thee to do so. Deuteronomy 18:10-14, Brenton Septuagint. Let's return to reading Joshua Trachtenberg's book, and we'll learn how the rabbis created legal loopholes for incantations, necromancy, sigil magic, and amulets in rabbinical Judaism within their Babylonian Talmud. The Bible had pronounced an unqualified condemnation of sorcery. The Talmud, while maintaining this fundamental attitude, pursued its customary function of clarifying and classifying Jewish law, and so broke up the all-inclusive category of sorcery into several divisions, establishing varying degrees of guilt. Two main types of forbidden magic were distinguished: that which produces a discernible material effect by means of the performance of an act, and that which only creates the illusion of such an act or its effect. Or, as a further observation defined them, the one operates without the aid of demons, the other requires their assistance. The practitioner of the first type merits the biblical penalty of death. The second is forbidden, but not so punishable. Still, a third kind of magic, permitted from the start, involved the use of the laws of creation, a term which was later interpreted to signify the mystical names of God and the angels. As Eliezer of Metz wrote, "I questioned my teachers about this, but they gave me no satisfactory reply. They spoke often of a forbidden magic in the narrow and technical Talmudic sense of the performance of an act, taking hold of a thing and manipulating it, or the performance of enchantments. Yet this prescribed magic did not include the other forms, the invocation of angels, the invocation of demons, and the employment of names, which they regarded as distinct divisions, at the least more acceptable, and by some expressly permitted and even employed. About the permissibility of employing names in angels there was no question, for the Talmud had legalized their use, but the invocation of demons was generally considered less praiseworthy. R. Eliezer of Metz held that invoking the demons to do one's will is permitted from the outset, for what difference is there between invoking demons or angels? An action may not be characterized as magic unless it consists of taking hold of a thing and manipulating it. That is, if it is the performance of a deed or an incantation that does not include an invocation of spirits, but invoking demons is permitted ab initio, from the beginning. Moses Isserles brings us closer to an understanding of what the forbidden magic was. The roots of the magical arts are three, he wrote: God, science, and nature. From God comes the power to invoke the heavenly princes by means of the holy names. The scientific root may be illustrated by astrology, by which a man can foretell the future, make talismans, and subdue the spirits and the powers of the stars, and the like. On natural elements depends the effectiveness of the various types of magic, all of which consist in bringing out the inner nature of things, whereby an expert may perform deeds strange in appearance. The rabbinic authorities set their face against all practices that smacked of Israel's heathen origins, and prominent among these was the performance of an act without resort to supernatural aid, which was for them the forbidden magic to be punished by death. Their opposition was not to magic generally, but to this particular idolatrous form. The use of angels, names, and even demons involving an appeal to the supernatural and a recognition of the supremacy of God was admitted past the barrier on sufferance, but the first type was rigorously excluded. It was this distinction which the medieval writers sensed and voiced negatively, without fully comprehending it. For the ancient bitter struggle against idolatry had long since been won, and the distinction had lost its force. Medieval Jewish magic depended almost entirely for its success upon the spirits and names. But the validity of superstition and magic was universally accepted, and the very rabbis who deprecated them were often obliged to condone them also. Moreover, no matter how violently they condemned popular misapplication of mystical teachings, they were obliged to admit that the permitted categories of magic, especially the invocation of godly and angelic names when practiced by adepts whose learning and piety could not be doubted, were in consonance with the religious tenets of Judaism and could not be denied.
Here is a timeline graphic I created to outline the development of Kabbalah within Rabbinical Judaism. It begins with the rise to power of the most prominent figure in the Babylonian Talmud, Rabbi Akiva, the infamous mystic sage and hater of Jesus Christ, and founder of what we call Rabbinical Judaism today. Rabbi Akiva was a driving force behind the Proto-Masoretic revisions to the Hebrew Old Testament, which later became the finalized corrupted Masoretic text Old Testament. This timeline graphic also highlights the time frame of when the majority of Jewish magical grimoires were written, practiced, and spread within Judaism. These grimoires, or magic books, contain information that was given to the Jewish sages through communication with fallen angels, and mostly with one very specific fallen angel named Raziel, who seems to be the most frequently channeled fallen angel for the majority of the world's received knowledge on the Kabbalah. These magic grimoires contain detailed teachings on things like magical alphabets, the names of angels, spirits, demons, and their specific sigils and seals, instructions for conducting rituals, creating amulets and talismans, zodiac magic and astrology, casting spells, and invoking spiritual entities. These rabbinical Kabbalah grimoires are the major foundation and source material for the majority of the world's occult practices today. The reason this is so important is because upon further investigation, we can see that the rabbis have actually infused and combined the same Kabbalistic demonic sorcery into the pages of the Leningrad Codex, which is the oldest original manuscript of the Hebrew Masoretic text Old Testament. This means that for centuries, the rabbis have literally been conducting sorcery and sigil magic through their corrupted version of the Old Testament scriptures, influencing and manipulating religious historical narratives among the undiscerning Christian population as well as the rest of the world. Let's examine and identify the sigil magic that the rabbis have infused into the Masoretic text. Here on archive.org, we can view the entire Leningrad Codex Hebrew Old Testament page by page. The Leningrad Codex is the oldest complete manuscript that exists for the Hebrew translation of the Masoretic text version of the Old Testament, which was created in Cairo, Egypt in 1008 AD by a group of Kabbalist rabbinical scribes called the Masoretes that flourished between the 6th and 10th centuries AD. On archive.org, we can scroll through every single page of the Leningrad Codex, and upon doing so, we will eventually discover that it contains 16 pages of illustrations called carpet pages. These 16 carpet pages are all illustrated in a similar manner, with each drawing containing written Hebrew script words and sentences that create the outlines to very specific geometric shapes. The scribal geometric artwork seems to be a form of Jewish Babylonian magic, as seen within incantation bowls used by the Babylonian Jews during the 6th to 8th centuries AD. This magical practice involved writing on bowls in a spiral, beginning from the rim and moving toward the center in the hopes that they could capture and control demons and spirits. Scholar John Charles Arnold states, when placed upside down under each corner of a house, demons would follow the inscribed charms that spiraled from the outer rim inward, only to be caught in the center. As we browse through the Leningrad Codex carpet pages, we can see that a very similar form of scribal magic is taking place here within this artwork, and every single shape on each of the 16 carpet pages uses the same technique. If we examine the geometric shapes, we see a very peculiar use of triangles and circles being used for endpoints for lines. The nearly identical use of these shapes are found in the majority of the Kabbalistic grimoires being used for invoking specific spirits. These Jewish magic grimoires teach the initiate that these shapes, used in specific ways, serve various purposes in occult magical practices, such as conducting rituals, creating amulets or talismans, casting spells, and invoking spiritual entities. And when we examine the 16 carpet pages in the Leningrad Codex, we see that this same technique is being used as well. So here now we see that the rabbis have inserted these occult shapes and magical devices into their Old Testament Hebrew translation. We can only guess as to whether or not they were making a magical sigil or a protective amulet or were just casting spells. However, their use of Kabbalah magic is undeniable. This carpet page here in the Leningrad Codex utilizes the specific version of the 8-pointed star that's called the 8/3 octagram. This is known as the Star of Ishtar, but also represents the majority of other ancient feminine goddesses in history who have been called the Queen of Heaven, such as Inanna, Venus, and Asherah. In the book Bloodlines of the Beast by Malik Bade on page 187 we read, the Shigi family coat of arms prominently features an 8-pointed star, a star historically linked to Ishtar or Inanna, the Babylonian goddess identified with the planet Venus. Over time, the symbolism of Venus evolved and was interpreted within various mystery schools and occult traditions as being synonymous with Lucifer, whose name in Latin literally means light bringer. In classical astronomy, Lucifer referred to the morning star, which is Venus, when it appears at dawn. Thus, the eight-pointed star is often seen in noble heraldry ranging from divine illumination to Luciferian enlightenment. This worship of Venus and the broader celestial pantheon traces back to Babylonian and Mesopotamian cosmology, where planetary bodies were deified and associated with specific energies, gods, and attributes. Many of the black nobility families, such as the Shigi, Orsini, and Aldobradini, appear to have retained and veiled these ancient traditions through symbolic expressions within their architecture, coat of arms, rituals, and public displays of power. We also find the 8/3 octagram star in the magical workings of the Keys of Solomon grimoire, where it's used in conjuring demons in what's called the seventh and last pentacle of Mars. If we examine this sigil closely, we see that it uses the same demonic alphabet that we see in the earliest Kabbalah texts, like the Sefer HaRazim that we discussed earlier. While I was researching the carpet pages of the Leningrad Codex, I discovered that the University of Southern California Dornsife, the College of Letters, Arts, and Sciences, had actually translated the Hebrew script on one of the carpet pages. USC Dornsife worked with translator Stephen A. Reed, who translated the Hebrew into English. This translation was part of a larger project over the last 40 years by USC Dornsife called the West Semitic Research Project. Translator Stephen A. Reed translated the most famous Leningrad Codex carpet page, named Folio 474A. This is the carpet page that contains the image of the star of Saturn, placed inside the octagram, also known as the Seal of Melchizedek. These two Kabbalistic seals are created by the use of Hebrew words and sentences that create the outline of the shapes. And now here we can see that according to Reed's translation, the rabbis wrote the Bible verse of Deuteronomy 28:12-13 as the text around the star of Saturn, which reads, Yod-He-Vav-He will open for you his rich storehouse, the heavens, to give the rain of your land in its season, and to bless all your undertakings. You will lend to many nations, but you will not borrow. And Yod-He-Vav-He shall make thee the head, and not the tail, and thou shalt be above only, and thou shalt not be beneath. If that thou hearken unto the commandments of Yod-He-Vav-He, thy Elohim, which I command thee this day, to observe and to do them. Deuteronomy 28:12-13, Masoretic text. After researching and learning all that we have discussed here about the magical Kabbalistic practices of the rabbis, I have no doubt in my mind that this truly is a form of Babylonian money magic. The fact that the rabbis chose the Bible verse specifically about loaning money, and then they write it in the same form of the Hebrew Babylonian incantation bowls, spiraling text that is meant to control and manipulate demons, is no accident. And it becomes even more obvious when we realize that the shape that is created by the spiraling text is a star that represents Remphan, Chiyun, Saturn, and ultimately Satan. Clearly, the rabbis have created a magic money sigil here on the carpet page illustration of the Leningrad Codex of their revised and corrupted Old Testament translation, a translation they attempted to remove Jesus Christ and Christianity, called the Masoretic text, which I proved in my previous video titled Episode 1, Establishing the Word. In the book Bloodlines of the Beast by Malik Bade, we read on pages 26 and 27. Cecil Roth's renowned work, The Jews of Venice, offers detailed insights into the role of Jewish communities within the Venetian economy, highlighting families like the Del Banco family. The Del Banco were a prominent Jewish Venetian banking family whose descendants eventually became the Warburgs, one of the most powerful banking dynasties in modern European history. The Warburgs played major roles in the development of central banking in Germany, Britain, and the United States, including key positions in institutions such as the Reich Bank and the U.S. Federal Reserve System. In many cases, they helped shape the emerging global financial system, drawing on centuries-old knowledge of trade, banking, and maritime commerce. These families also continued to exert quiet influence through transnational banking networks, philanthropic foundations, and intermarriage with other European aristocracies. Today, the legacy of these families remains embedded in the architecture of global finance, particularly in private banking, central banking, and long-standing institutions. During the 19th century, the Rothschild family, once key financiers of the Habsburg Empire and allies of the old Venetian party, became one of the most powerful banking dynasties in Europe. Their London branch emerged as the center of their operations, where they managed the daily price of gold, giving them major influence over global finance. Like the Venetian bankers before them, the Rothschilds built a private international network that operated above national governments, using gold and credit to shape economic and political outcomes across Europe. When U.S. officials like George Shultz and Paul Volcker ended the dollar's link to gold in 1971, they didn't just modernize the system. They revived an older tradition, a return to unlimited financial speculation, free from the constraints of gold. In many ways, this marked a return to the Venetian model of banking, where control of money, not territory, shaped global power. The Rothschild-Vatican Alliance, shaping global power through wealth and faith. Nathan Rothschild's funding of Britain helped defeat Napoleon, a major enemy of the Catholic Church, boosting Rothschild's wealth and power. Afterward, the Rothschild family formed close ties with the Vatican. In the 1830s, Pope Gregory XVI honored Karl Rothschild after he loaned the Vatican £5 million during a financial crisis. Side note, today that's worth over $740 million, making the Rothschilds the Vatican's official financial agents. This alliance gave the Rothschilds strong influence over church finances and helped them expand into the United States, where they supported financial systems aligned with Vatican interests. Through this relationship, the Rothschilds gained global reach, blending religious influence with economic power to shape politics, banking, and international affairs. With this in mind, let's go ahead and look at the Great Seal of the United States of America on the $1 bill, where we see the hexagram by no accident. This is no doubt a reference to the Synagogue of Satan's Kabbalistic sigil in the Leningrad Codex of Folio 474a. To further prove this connection, let's turn to page 45 in the book, The Secret Destiny of America, written by 33rd degree Freemason Manly P. Hall, where we read, "Here is represented the Great Pyramid of Giza, composed of 13 rows of masonry, showing 72 stones. The pyramid is without a capstone, and above its upper platform floats a triangle containing the all-seeing eye, surrounded by rays of light. The 72 stones are the 72 arrangements of the Tetragrammaton, or the four-letter name of God, in Hebrew. These four letters can be combined in 72 combinations, resulting in what is called the Shem HaMephorash, which represents, in turn, the laws, powers, and energies of nature by which the perfection of man is achieved. The pyramid, then, is a universal house, and above its unfinished apex is a radiant emblem of the great architect of the universe." Well, well, well. It's all starting to make sense now, isn't it?